Hello, and welcome to the All Things Narrative Podcast, where we explore the relationships between the stories we love and the stories we live. I'm your host, Derrick, and let's get started. I am so excited for this episode. You guys don't even know how good this is, because I am sitting here with my favorite person in the whole world, Miss Tori Hatch.
Hello.
And it's just me and Tori for this one. So you might have heard Tori if you listened to our Why We Love Harry Potter episode, and she knew way more about Harry Potter than I do. And so this one, she's just kind of along for the ride, right?
Yep.
But I'm really excited to get to do this with her, because not only has she seen all the material that we're going to talk about, but she was actually, and this might be the only thing I think I've ever talked about on the podcast that I could say this about with us. We were on this journey together. You know, with a lot of these franchises, you know, I had seen all the films, and then I was the one bringing Tori in, or with like Harry Potter, you had seen the films and you were kind of bringing me into everything. Mm-hmm. This one, we went into it together.
We were blind.
We had no idea what we were getting into, right? Mm-hmm. And I just got to start off by saying, like, a huge kudos to that for you, because
that I stuck with it.
Well, no, I'm actually more impressed that you even started it to begin with, honestly.
Because I was against it.
I don't know if you were really against it. I think you were just skeptical, right?
That's a good word for it. Skeptical.
Yeah. I have heard for many, many years that, you know, Studio Ghibli is like the peak of animation. And I've always wanted to get around to watching these films, but it just never happened. They weren't around when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And,
well, nobody we knew them either. It's not like,
right.
It's not like any of our friends were like, oh, have you seen Totoro? And we're like, what?
Yeah, we didn't really have friends.
Thing that you're like, hey, we're gonna watch these Japanese movies.
Yeah, so that's basically what it was like, you know, I hear about them a lot, and I'm as someone who likes film, I'm very interested in like hearing what the best are, you know, what people perceive and all that. So I do make Tori sit through a lot of things. And this was one of them. And so we're going to do a whole episode on them. So if you don't know what Studio Ghibli is, and if you don't know what the All Things Narrative Podcast is, and let me be the first to just say welcome. We're glad you're here if this is your first time. So at All Things Narrative, we are really focused with these Why We Love episodes, which have been the third Tuesdays of every month that they've been releasing. We're really focused at analyzing, why do we love a certain series or set of stories, right? These are the stories that have sunken into our pop culture and have had huge waves of influence. And we want to try to understand why. What is it about these stories that we're so gravitating towards and that we resonate with so deeply, that we spend an hour and a half talking about them? So this is, you know, we started these in March, and this is number 9 right now. And this is kind of what I've been building up to a bit, because this is, I'm going to just say it, my opinion on this. I think of all the series that we've done, I think this is the best collection of films out of any of them. Agree or disagree?
I don't know. I don't really have that opinion formed.
Yeah.
Yet. I will say this one doesn't seem as influential on culture as the other ones, but that's because we're in America.
Right. So it's good to start off by saying that Studio Ghibli, it is a Japanese company. They're an animation studio, and we'll get into the history of it in a little bit. But basically, they have become very prominent globally. And we'll kind of get into how they got to that place. But yeah, what I basically mean though is that, like, if we look at each in terms of like the quality of the films, right? All the X-Men films, all the Spider-Man, Marvel films, all the Star Wars films, all the Harry Potter films, all the Lord of the Rings and Narnia films. I think this, if you average out the quality of them all, I think this comes out the highest, at least in my opinion. And I think part of that is because Studio Ghibli, these films are so incredibly diverse. They do have overlapping ideas and themes, but man, watching these all like back to back over, it took us about roughly almost a year, right? I remember
I feel like even longer than that.
This was back in 2019 that we started, and it was in like, I think March or something that we did the first one, and we went all the way till around Christmas time. So it took us a while, and we didn't even do all of them in the first round. We actually left
so many.
Yeah. So we actually left like 6 off, I think, or something like that, maybe 8. So yeah, so it was interesting, just seeing like, wow, these films are so different from each other. And I kind of had a little bit of an idea of what we were going to get into and tried to give you a little bit of heads up, like, oh, this one is going to be really sad. Oh, this one's going to be really cute and fun, But yeah, if you haven't seen any of these films at all, then I'm going to try not to spoil them, but there's going to be moments where you can't not with some of these. So if you haven't seen these, I really highly encourage you to check them out. You won't be disappointed. Not all of these films are going to hit for you. I think they're too diverse to hit with everybody. But I do think that there is at least going to be a few Ghibli films for every person that you're really going to connect with. Because that's just how...
That's fair.
Yeah, that's just how well made and how universal a lot of these films are in their themes. So I'll also give the preface here that we did not watch these in the subs. So we watched all of these in dub form because I don't think I could have convinced you to do this if we did them all in subtitles.
I don't know. I mean, I don't... Well, it's hard because we watch some of these with our kids, and obviously they're not reading yet. So it made more sense to watch the English version than you can't.
Yeah, that is true.
5 and
some
2.
of these we watched for the first time with our kids, and we'll tell you which ones those are. We'll tell you which ones are good for kids as well. If if you're
not all of them.
Parents, yeah. So we'll talk a lot about that, but. Yeah, so I know a lot of people are like purists about the subs and stuff, and I try to look at like the differences and try to understand them, but so these are all based on the dubbed versions. So are we ready to get into this? So we're going to do things kind of a little bit differently. If you listen to our X-Men episode, this will be a bit familiar. But essentially, instead of doing like the history separate, talking about the themes and analysis separately, we're going to kind of mix it all together. So that way you can kind of see hand in hand how this all developed here. And so we are going to really highlight the 10 films that were directed by Hayao Miyazaki, who's kind of the most influential, I would say, architect of Studio Ghibli. And so we're going to look at all 10 of his films. After we do his 10 films, we will end by talking about our rankings. And along the way, we'll share how these inspire us to live a meaningful story as well. So, because you can't help but mention that as you're talking about these films. So the first one we're going to talk about, and we watched these all in the order that they were made. So that's the order we'll talk about them here as well. So the first one we're going to talk about is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is a mouthful of a title. So in case you haven't seen these, I'll give like these really brief synopses that I found on Letterboxd here. So for Nausicaa, it's after a global war. The seaside kingdom, known as the Valley of the Wind, remains one of the last strongholds on Earth, untouched by a poisonous jungle and the powerful insects that guard it. Led by the courageous Princess Nausicaa, the people of the valley engage in an epic struggle to restore the bond between humanity and Earth. So, Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata are kind of the two primary founders of Studio Ghibli. But this film is actually was created before Studio Ghibli even existed. This film was made because I think it was an editor of a Japanese, like a manga magazine or something like that. And his name was Toshio Suzuki. His name will come up a lot in these. And he was kind of more of that like producer role. And he knew Miyazaki as they had collaborated. And he said, Miyazaki, you should really make a film, make a feature of your own original work. And so Miyazaki had this idea for a long time of wanting to make a story of basically what becomes Nausicaa. But back then, this is about the early 80s, if you wanted to make an anime, you couldn't just do something original. You had to adapt something, adapt a book, adapt a manga, something like that. So Suzuki said, why don't you create a manga for Nausicaa? He said, okay, I will. So we actually have it on the shelf up there. I haven't read it yet. I mean, I know it's phenomenal from everything I've heard, but he started writing and telling the story, and then it got really popular as a manga. And then Suzuki was able to get some sponsors to finance the film being made. And so it was made with this partnering.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Manga is just a comic book?
Yeah, it's like a Japanese like comic book format. So essentially, they make the film. So it's Miyazaki, and Takahata's there too. Takahata's helping produce it and make it as well. Suzuki's there as the producer, and then Takahata says, hey, I got this great guy who can do music. I think we should bring him in. He's an experimental jazz musician, and his name is Joe Hisaichi. So they bring him in, and those 4 people right there, that's basically like the foundation of Studio Ghibli, right? Suzuki produces every film. Most of the films are either produced or directed by Miyazaki or Takahata. And so they're involved in every way except for one film. And Joe does most of the music for a lot of the films. Not all of them, but he does it for quite a few of them. And he's definitely in the one that when we think of the Ghibli sound, that score, that soundtrack, or what our kids listen to, that's his songs that we're hearing constantly, right? Which, do they ever get annoying to you?
Surprisingly not. I like the soundtracks. We listen to them in the car because the kids like it, and it's a lot less annoying than a lot of other soundtracks.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Miyazaki wanted to make Nausicaa, he was really inspired. There's an old folk tale. I'm not sure if it's Japanese or not, but it's called The Girl Who Loves Insects. Your face squished up with that. Yeah, there's a lot of bug stuff in this movie, and I think that's actually one of the reasons why he picked bugs, is because you can't really make bugs redeemable. You know, I know Pixar tried with A Bug's Life, but
nobody cares about bugs.
Yeah, so that's actually why he picked bugs, because he wanted to be able to take something of nature that many people despise and abhor and actually explain how they're vital and important to it.
Note how he didn't have mosquitoes in there.
Yep, he still didn't pick mosquitoes because, you know, they're still the worst. So he was also inspired by these early Miyazaki works are very Western in how they're influenced. So Nausicaa is it's very post-apocalyptic. Yeah. So it's very influenced by Dune, actually. That was a huge influence for it. But he was also influenced by Lord of the Rings. That was a big one for Nausicaa. And even the Odyssey he claims as an influence. So yeah, in fact, I have these like cool director statements. So every time he comes up with a project, he has a pitch that he proposes to, you know, not just to himself, but to everybody involved.
A thesis statement.
Yeah, it's like a thesis statement, exactly. And, you know, it's not hard to figure out what these movies are about, because not only are the films so well written that you can tell, but Miyazaki is very good at explaining what he wants to get across, including who his audience is and what he's hoping for them to take away. So this is what he says for Nausicaa. So he said, for the past few years, I have put forth ideas for film projects with the following ethos: to offer a sense of liberation to present-day young people who, in the suffocating, overprotective, and overmanaged society, find their path to self-reliance, independence blocked, and therefore have become neurotic. A major theme of this work is the manner in which people engage with nature, the nature surrounding them and upon which they are dependent. Can hope even exist during this twilight era? So Nausicaa comes out. It's a massive success. It's huge. It's so big, actually, that Miyazaki continues doing the manga for 10 years.
10 years?
10 years. 1994 is when he finally stops. And there's a reason why he stops, and I'll get there later. But it goes on for 10 years. That's how successful, and that's how much he loves the project too. He's really invested in telling that story. So we really see in this film the seeds of what Ghibli's going to be, which is going to be kind of like the trifecta of Ghibli in terms of themes is young, strong female protagonist coming of age story, environmentalism, and the horrors of war. Every Ghibli film is a combination of at least two of those three things.
Yeah.
And here in Nausicaa, you get all three of them to start. So, Tori, as you're kind of hearing, the director's statement and some of this behind the scenes stuff of Nausicaa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nausicaa was a great intro for us coming from the Western mindset because it still had kind of the flow of like a Western epic type movie.
Yes, yes.
So it was a good intro point.
Definitely.
For us.
We've gotten to the point where our kids can watch it too. It's a little intense for kids.
Yeah, it doesn't work for the younger one.
But anything that really stands out to you in it?
I like the idea of restoration. I like that theme that's in there. I really, anytime there's a movie that's showing something broken, but showing the hope that things can be restored, is always a win in my mind.
Yeah, it is a very hopeful film, especially with the ending too, The ending is actually different from the manga as well.
The manga went on for 10 years.
The manga is a lot dark. It is a lot bleaker. Because there's a lot more story that they tell. Well, anytime you
have to stretch a story for 10 years, you're going to go.
Right.
You're not going to have as clean of an ending.
Right. But Nausicaa's a great aspirational hero, right? Like, because Nausicaa is kind of supposed to be like who everyone in the story should want to be like.
The savior figure.
Right.
She's the one
yes. Very much like a savior figure.
They're all talking about this savior king that's going to come, and then it turns out it's her. So, yes, she is the aspirational hero, as you would say.
Right. Yeah, she definitely is. And she's got the cutest little fox squirrel. That's what that thing is called. That's just like adorable. I wish those existed in real life. I think the what this film builds to and that final like climactic sequence with the warrior god that they resurrect that's not ready, right? And then all the bugs that are stampeding and Nausicaa trying to figure out how to, like, there's so much chaos going on, but you're so invested in it all. And it's a solid first film.
Very solid.
To jump into, Yeah. I don't think it's the best of what they have to offer, but it's a great intro. Especially like what you said, if you're more Western, it's like, okay, I can come into this, right? Mm-hmm. And so Nausicaa's great, and it did really well, and it's been very influential in the genre for some time.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a good one. Let's go to the next one. So the second one we'll talk about is Castle in the Sky. I'll read the little description here. A young boy and a girl with a magical crystal must race against pirates and foreign agents in search for a legendary floating castle. That's all it gave me there.
Sounds like a fantasy.
Yep, it is very fantasy adventure, right? So I'll tell you a little about the development of this. So after Nausicaa, Miyazaki wanted to make another film, but wanted to be able to do it on his own terms. And have full control of the process. And so
he didn't have full control over Nausicaa?
It's not to say that he didn't, but all the animation was outsourced.
Oh.
So what we'll learn about Miyazaki is that he wants to be very hands-on with the animation. Not only is Miyazaki as a director personally drawing many of these cells, but he's personally overseeing them to an obsessive compulsory.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
But that's probably why it takes them so long to put out a film.
It's why it takes them extremely long to put out films.
You're trying to get into one man's mind.
Yes. And he knows what he wants. He's very firm on what he wants. So, and if you can't give it to him, he'll do it again and again until you can. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he, along with Takahata and Joe Hisashi and Suzuki, they found Studio Ghibli. Which, do you know where the name comes from?
Do tell.
So Ghibli, it's actually there's a double meaning to it. So Ghibli is an Italian word that refers to a World War II Italian fighter plane.
They like planes, don't they?
Yes, because Ghibli is also a word that means a fresh and new wind. Like it's a wind that's coming from a new direction, right? Okay. And so when they found Ghibli, they said, we wanted to bring a fresh wind to animation, to the animation industry.
Very cool.
And so what he wanted to start off with, what they wanted their first film to be out for Ghibli, it's very intentional. All the same people are back for it creatively. And they wanted to make a film that was really rooted in classic animation. So the animation that all of those people fell in love with, right? And so the storytelling, it's influenced by a lot of classic stories, like classic fiction. So like Gulliver's Travels, Treasure Island, things like that. There's even a bit of a steampunk aesthetic to it as well. It's very like late 1800s, early 1900s. But yeah, so it's very Western, very Spielberg-like, very adventurous.
Yes, for sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. Lots of action, very action-packed. One of the only Ghibli films that has a clearly villainous antagonist. The morality of the characters gets a lot more gray as we go on, but we have a clear good and clear evil, but we still have some moral ambiguity with the pirates.
Yeah,
with
pirates
Dala and the pirate gang
are not your friend, and then they
right.
at the end. So
yeah, he's also influenced by Wales, which we've talked about going to for so long. That's actually most likely, even though it's like a fictional story, that's kind of where the town and all that stuff is inspired by the landscape and the animation, because he visited there while there was like a miners strike going on. So all that stuff about going to the mines and everything, that all comes from real life experiences that he's trying to bring to light about the miner situation in Wales. But here's what he says. Here's his proposal for this film. He says, this is going to be a 90-minute film that aims to be fun, intense, thrilling, a classic action film. It will have laughter, tears, and a sentimentally honest spirit, and will all depict themes of emotional bonding and self-sacrifice, things modern audiences are skeptical of, but without realizing it, really crave. This is a project to bring animation back to its roots. So do you think he achieved that?
The thing that stood out was sincere and honest, because I will say that they're not annoying. Mm-hmm. That's what I like. And same with Nausicaa. It's like the main character, even though it might be like a coming of age, but at the same time, they're rooted in honesty. They're rooted in their morals as that main character.
Right.
And they're growing in that.
Right.
So I do like that about both of those films. And just the I don't know, it's almost like the purity of their honesty. Like
purity is a good word for that.
Like it's like very much like you're doing the right thing. It's the right thing to do. And then the boy, it's just this very innocent, like, I want to know this castle in the sky. Like, I want to go see it. Like, my dad talked about this. Like, I want to go do this. And if you're going, I'm going, Mm-hmm. And so it's very sweet. Yeah,
I think so too. And I think this is a film that, like, this is like a crowd pleaser film. This is the kind of film that, like, I can't imagine somebody watching it and just hating it. Like, this really seems like a film that, like, you could just throw on with a group of people. People will have a good time, Again, it might not be like the favorite film for a lot of people for Ghibli, but it is like it's just solid. It's just good.
And
it's
fun. Definitely geared toward like older kids. It's not for like little ones. I feel like it's geared toward like that. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple highlights
for me, and I really, really, this is where the music, like, music in Nausicaa was cool, but then this music is like, oh, this is like really pretty, just very moving, and there's just so many great sequences. I mean, the pirates are so much fun, especially as you get to kind of see how their role changes. But I think the standout moment for me is kind of once they get to Laputa, once they get to the castle in the sky. And you have that very quiet moment for a while where they're just up there and they see the robot, which the robot, they saw one version of the robot earlier and it was like a threat. But then they see the robot here. And technology is a huge theme too in a lot of these films, is like, what's the proper place of technology? And it's super on the nose here, but this idea of like a robot that's tending a garden. So you have technology serving nature, right? I think that's really cool. And that's just such a great image. And same with technology serving Patsu and Cheetah, right? Showing them around the castle. Whereas earlier they were using technology and they were trying to, with Muska and his guys, they were trying to kind of find out how to manipulate this robot, and kind of like the warrior god in Nausicaa as well. So yeah, it's technology. It's not anti-technology. It's like, where's technology in its proper place with nature?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So, and I do think it's very intense. It's got a very intense final showdown.
Yes, it is definitely intense. It's not one that you fall asleep during.
No. It's definitely a good one to check out. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then definitely go to this one. This could be another great intro one as well. I think the characters will get more developed and refined, and the storytelling will get a little more sophisticated over time. But again, another solid film and a great first one. But it's interesting because this film actually does not do as well as Nausicaa when it comes out. It becomes influential culturally quite a bit for creators and for audiences as well, particularly in anime and gaming. This film doesn't do super well, but it does okay. It does well enough to where Ghibli has some credit out there. Now, Miyazaki, actually, looking back on this film, he's actually not super proud of this film. He actually doesn't like some of the influence that it's unintentionally had in anime. Especially like when you see Miyazaki and how he depicts violence later, you'll see that he kind of changes violence being from spectacle to violence being very gut wrench. Yeah,
not redeeming, not for a purpose.
Exactly. This feels more like blockbuster, type of violence, and he kind of starts to shy away from that. But nonetheless, when we get to go to the Ghibli Museum one day in Japan, you're greeted by the giant robot outside the museum. They have a statue of it, which is pretty cool. The next one that comes up is My Neighbor Totoro. So My Neighbor Totoro, two sisters move to the country with their father in order to be closer to their hospitalized mother and discover the surrounding trees are inhabited by Totoros, magical spirits of the forest. When the youngest runs away from home, the older sister seeks help from the spirits to find her. Miyazaki wanted to create a more Japanese film with this, and he was very inspired by this image of a girl waiting at a bus stop with an umbrella and this Totoro creature, which he had been developing the design for a while for another project of his, which we'll talk about later. So it's actually funny. Totoro was actually designed for, you want to guess which Miyazaki film?
No.
Princess Mononoke.
Oh, God. That's a total different.
Yep. You had because Totoro is a very lighthearted film, right?
Yes.
It's very much about that childlike wonder and innocence. And I know people
loves it.
Oh yeah, our 2-year-old, this is their favorite thing ever. When we went to Barnes and Noble for her birthday a year ago, and I let her pick anything in the store, she found a little Totoro and said, "He needs me." And she sleeps with that Totoro every night to this day. So yeah, Totoro is big, and Totoro does eventually become the icon of Studio Ghibli, right? When they start merchandising, which is not till about another 6 years or so after this. But Miyazaki actually had a hard time getting Totoro made. This was the pitch that he made, the director's statement, which is that My Neighbor Totoro aims to be happy and heartwarming, a film that lets the audience go home with pleasant good feelings, and something that a parent and a child could sit down together and enjoy. For the child to kind of capture this wonder of like, wow, there's a great world out there I want to go check out. And for parents, kind of that nostalgic like, wow, it's a magical time to be a child. Do you think he really captured that with his film?
Absolutely. I think that's totally on the nose there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a very, it's very whimsical. It's very, I don't want to say it's slow. It's very leisurely, right? It takes its time.
Yeah, you don't Yeah, it has a different pace than all the other ones.
Yeah.
That we mentioned prior. Which is why I like it, because the other ones are too fast for little kids to where they don't understand what's going on. They can't keep up with all the characters, what's going on, and why are they fighting? Why are they not fighting? What's going on? Like, this is a very slow pace that's easy to comprehend, easy to understand, that doesn't have a lot of it's just chill and calm and happy for most of the part. And even the climax, you could say,
when it gets a little more intense.
When it gets more intense, it's like a very reasonable amount of intensity. Like, it's something that a child can understand and can actually relate to. Yeah.
Yeah. There is this idea of coping with challenges, right? Because they have a mom that's sick. That's actually based off of Miyazaki's real life mom. Who also was sick while he was growing up with tuberculosis. And, Miyazaki very much saw himself in the character of Satsuki, that older sibling. Yeah, I don't think he was even the oldest, but that sibling trying to take responsibility for the family.
Take care of the younger one.
Yeah, and of course you have the Totoros, influenced by, I think they're called kami. They're like the Japanese like forest spirits or something like that. Yeah, I mean this is where like the music's getting better, the animation's getting better, the story's getting tighter. Yeah, the countryside. I mean, it's all, you'll see this pattern, and it starts with Totoro of like leaving the city and moving to the countryside, right? So I like it because I feel like the kids feel super realistic.
Yeah.
They
seem like kids.
They seem like kids. Yeah. Not like our film idea of kids, you know? They actually seem like real living, breathing kids. And, it's good to see like the parents, like the dad, who's just super supportive and isn't like, oh, you're making this up, or, he's very supportive of their adventures.
Yes.
And what they're doing.
And it's also a very realistic picture of parents.
Yes.
Yeah. They're not just like a superhero, or they're not like totally like letting the kids do whatever they want. Like they're, it's a good balance. And
you get a cat bus. How do you not love a cat bus, right? I mean, where else are you going to see a cat bus in anything? Know. So, yeah, My Neighbor Totoro. It's awesome. It's, if you have little kids, I cannot recommend this enough. This is a great film for little kids.
Well, and this is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, same here.
Because I enjoy watching it with my kids, and it's not something that I have to explain to my kids as I go, and it's also not something where I have to like pause it and like talk about morality or talk about something or like backtrack because something's happening that I don't think is good. Like the whole thing at the end is like, the little girl runs off without telling anybody.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole thing, is they're trying to find her, and you see how terrifying that is.
Yeah, you really do.
You really see how that is really, not only is it dangerous because they're worried about her, like, the whole idea of her drowning in the pond, that's terrifying, or her like missing, doesn't know where she is. So like it really does a good job of showing like, this is why we don't run away from
yeah.
This is why we don't run away. I always appreciate when a story can tell a moral that I'm like, please get this. Yeah,
you're behind that one.
Like that is a good moral. Don't run away without
And I know like you're gonna hear throughout this podcast that some of these films are very leisurely in their pace, right? Because in the West we're very
go.
We're lots of action. I don't even let my kids watch any modern shows besides Bluey, because the animation and the story, there's not enough time to like digest everything. It's so
there's not enough time to understand what's going on.
Yeah. So like, don't let the leisurely pacing turn you off of these films,
doesn't
because
feel like it drags. It definitely doesn't feel like it drags.
We have two kids. Our oldest one can sit through anything pretty much. She's got an incredible attention span, always has, from when she was a little baby, and still has that. Our youngest one tends to wander and get bored with things.
She's not even 3. She's almost 3.
Right.
So.
But she will sit through Totoro. the entire movie,
which is
with its leisurely pacing, because she's just vibing and enjoying it.
Yeah,
and so
and I will caveat that if you're sitting with her watching it, if you think that you can just like turn it on and go do laundry or something,
no, you should always be watching things with your kids, anyways.
With your kids,
yeah,
you can't just like turn something on and walk away because
so true. Now, this film was a double bill because the sponsors didn't have enough faith in it. They didn't think it was going to be worth anything. So the only reason why the film got made was because they were really invested in Takahata's film, which is Grave of the Fireflies. And they said, and Suzuki, as the great producer he is, said, okay, if you make Grave of the Fireflies, you have to make Totoro. We have to sponsor Totoro too. They said, fine. And Grave of the Fireflies, which is probably the best film I've ever seen that I will never watch again, right?
Accurate.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Was created with the hopes that school children could learn about the war. Little field trips to go see Grave of the Fireflies.
How old are these children?
Elementary. And middle school. Yep.
Maybe middle school. I could see that. But elementary, oh, geez.
Yeah. So imagine getting a double bill, and the order changed. It varied. So you never knew what the order was going to be, which one was going to go first, which was going to be second.
How does the double bill work? Like you watch both movies back to back?
You watch the first movie, you have an intermission, and then you go back and watch the second one. So imagine watching Grave of the Fireflies, getting your heart ripped out. Then you go back and watch Totoro. La, 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 la. Or you watch Totoro and you're happy and feel good, and then you watch Grave of the Fireflies. I wouldn't have wanted that one. No, that would have been the hard one.
I don't think I would have wanted to watch them together. They do not match at all.
It's funny, though, because even though they don't, they actually do in a lot of... There actually is a lot of similarities.
I mean, there's the two siblings. The older takes care of the younger. I get that.
And even the time period is similar, too.
Okay.
You know? So there's certain ideas there.
The level of intensity is very, very different.
Yes, it is.
Totoro's like a 1 on intensity, and Grave of the Firefly is like a 9-10.
Right. So do you think this double bill did well?
I doubt it.
Yeah, you're right. It did not do well. Didn't do well at all, but both films were very highly praised and acclaimed.
Just not together.
Right.
Gotcha.
But even though financially it didn't make a lot of money, critically it got a lot of attention. So even Roger Ebert, the most famous film critic in American history, had a glowing endorsement for it, which was huge in eventually later. It like getting Ghibli films to really come out to America and grow in the West was a very gradual process. So like Roger Ebert, like giving the film a perfect rating that helped build the momentum a little bit.
Is this after this the point? Because I feel like with all of these How We Love franchises, is this the point where they go bankrupt because they tried too hard?
Yes, it is.
And then they go bankrupt because...
I promise you did not plan that out. We did not plan that out. Yes, you are correct, though.
I'm like, I bet you this is how it's going to go. Because once they make something that's awesome, it's like critically amazing, but the public is like, then they go bankrupt.
Man, you are absolutely right.
There's a theme in all of this.
This is the moment here. The double bill broke the studio. It was very hard to recover from this. And so they were desperate. This is probably the most desperate Studio Ghibli ever is. Most people in the press are saying they will not make it. They are saying that they're done. Miyazaki already had this idea of adapting a short novel called Kiki's Delivery Service. And at first he wasn't going to direct it. But then seeing the desperate state the studio is in, takes the reins himself, and in 1 year makes the whole film.
Seriously? In 1 year? Didn't all the other ones take like 5+ years? Or?
No.
I feel like they were huge.
But he does it in a year.
1 year.
Rushes Kiki.
I love Kiki.
But these people at Ghibli were working like their jobs and their livelihood depended on it.
Well, they did.
Because it did. So this film, I'll read the little synopsis here of it. A young witch on her mandatory year of independent life finds fitting into a new community difficult while she supports herself by running an air courier or delivery service. So Kiki, the author, the writer of the book that they got the permission for the rights for, was not happy originally with what they wanted to change with the story. But then Miyazaki invited her in and showed her.
Is it a Japanese story or who's
I actually don't know.
from?
That's a good question.
It doesn't feel very Japanese, at least the way it looks.
Right.
The looks of it. It looks very different from Totoro.
Kiki is very European.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Kiki is meant to feel like the idealized European city.
Okay.
As if World War II never happened. That's actually what he says about it.
Beautiful clock towers and
it's very
things
very
and
innocent. Yep, and he takes the best of a lot of his European travels and kind of like he literally had the animators draw a map, like a real map of the thing, so that way when they were making it, they actually had a real working map. That's
Makes sense.
Yeah, it feels really alive. I think this might be Miyazaki's best looking town that he's ever created in any film. I can't think of another film where it's that pretty. It's that pretty. Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm not a big city person, but I would live there. You know, it's just stunning. This is what his director's statement is for Kiki. He says, it is no longer appropriate to refer to leaving one's parents as a rite of passage, because all it takes today to live on one's own society is the ability to shop at the local convenience store. The true independence girls must now confront involves the far more difficult task of discovering their own talents. I feel that this film will fulfill its goal of reaching out with a feeling of solidarity to our young viewers. The young girls living in today's world who do not deny the joy of youth, nor are carried away by it, torn between freedom and dependence. Kiki is a film that's very much has a target audience of young adults. Even though Kiki's only 13, there's this idea of teens and young adults who are transitioning into adulthood. That's really the target that he's going for here with Kiki. And this film is so draining and exhausting that Miyazaki actually wants to retire after making it.
Well, if you did the whole thing in a year...
Right.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, he wants to be done after this. It's made for young women mainly, but also young men as well, trying to head into the world and find their place. They also get a lot of money from advertising because, the logo that they show for Kiki's delivery service in the movie, her little witch and her cat Gigi, right? And all that. That actually is a real logo of a delivery company in Japan. Nice. And they actually paid top dollar to get that logo in the movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really funny. Yeah, Kiki is... Do you think it's a success or a failure?
Probably a success.
It is their biggest success.
Yeah.
It is the film that saved Studio Ghibli. Without Kiki, we probably would not have Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
It really is the film that carries them forward. It's massively successful, and it's one of the first, maybe it even is the first, when Disney starts bringing Ghibli films to America in the 90s. I think Kiki is the first one they do. I think in 1997, I think they do that first. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, when you think of Kiki, what are your thoughts on Kiki?
Well, I just love Kiki. I really like that one too. I mean, it's not like a super fast-paced one either. Which
more leisurely, yeah.
It's more leisurely, but it's not as leisurely as Totoro. And I just like watching her grow up. Like she starts out and she's not like she's a lot more, I'm trying to think of the word, not immature. I guess you could say immature, but you see her maturing as the film goes on. Like she starts out kind of like that, more like, oh, what's everyone going to think of me?
There's an
insecurity there.
Have you ever?
Then you see her like, starting to grow out of that, where she matures and she's not so like, the way she treats her friends, or the people, her peer group, at first she's just like on the outside wanting to be like them.
Right.
And then when they invite them in, she's like, no.
Yeah.
And then like she starts to, by the end, she starts to kind of accept who she is.
Right.
And then because of that, she's able to actually make friends and like feel more a part of the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard the theory that Gigi is Kiki's subconscious?
You have told me that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? When you watch the movie that way, Gigi's her cat. Yeah. And you're like, when you see certain scenes and you see Gigi is like, you start to wonder, is Gigi expressing what Kiki's really feeling right now? And it's interesting because I think for me, Kiki might be my favorite protagonist of any of the Ghibli films. I think as a character, there's just the most I could see of her. Like, I think she's really well thought out.
Yes.
She's incredibly relatable. This is definitely a movie that if you are a starter, like if you like an entrepreneur, a creative, anything like that, this is a
kids
great
going, starting a new school.
Yeah. Any new chapter that you're starting in life, this is a great film to watch because it doesn't sugarcoat it by saying that you're going to get that job and everything's going to work out okay and you're going to always get to do what you love and that you're always going to love what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really interesting, right? The way that she deals with that and has to kind of rediscover why she loves flying.
Mm-hmm.
So Kiki is a very inspirational film. I think it's a film that, again, whether you're a kid, it's great. If you're an adult, it's great. I think the messages really carry well. It is for me top tier Ghibli. I think this is definitely the best film they have up to this point. I'm kind of with the critics there. Like, I think this is incredible. This is where you start watching in the marathon and you're kind of like, okay, this is pretty flawless track record, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't talk about Grave of the Fireflies, but as hard as that is, you can't deny how good of a film it is. So, and how effective it is in what it's doing. So
Grave
it's
of
like
the Fireflies is an excellent. It's one of those types of movies that really makes you evaluate your thoughts on things and evaluate your biases toward things like war and justice and things like that. So Grave of the Fireflies is an excellent movie. However, it is also a movie that you have to be prepared mentally for.
Right.
It's not something you're like, oh, what do you want to do? Oh, let's watch a movie.
Let's watch Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah, because it's a movie that you can't not feel.
Right.
And you can't not consider and think about.
Yeah. So this is the end of the 80s. So when we get, and the output is very high. Now when we get to the 90s, things start to spread out a little more. So we start to see other works from people other than Miyazaki and Takahata. We start to see experiments like a television film that they make called Ocean Waves. And we get to see Miyazaki do something that he's wanted to do for a while. This kind of idea that he would sketch out and did little mangas for in magazines and stuff. And that's this idea of what if pigs could fly, aka Porco Rosso. I think this is his most, until we get to The Wind Rises, a very autobiographical film in a lot of ways. I don't know if you know this, but when Miyazaki does his self-portrait, he always draws himself as a pig. Because
that's interesting because he hates pigs in all the Ghibli movies.
I don't think he necessarily hates pigs. I think
they're always representatives of something bad or
they're
dark.
They're cursed. That's the idea.
Yeah,
and Miyazaki has said that he believes that he is cursed.
Cursed with what?
Famously, he has said that animation was a mistake for me to get into.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So there is this idea in pigs that the pig is cursed in some way, and he sees himself as that. Because I think for him, he gets to a point in his career, he's very hopeful in these early films. You will see soon he starts getting really cynical, and it's because he believes that he is not making a difference, that he is not inspiring or influencing any change. So that's
why Porco Rosso is the story that it is, I take it. Because that's basically the character.
Yeah,
I think a cynical guy who's good at what he does.
Yeah,
and hates what he does.
I do think Porco Rosso still has a hint of optimism into it, especially with the ending.
Yeah,
but I do think you are starting to see a little bit of, Porco Rosso was. Here, I'll read the little description here. That'll kind of explain it. Known as the Crimson Pig, and World War I fighter ace. now living as a freelance bounty hunter chasing air pirates. He's been given a curse that changed himself into a pig. And so we find out in the film that the reason why this curse has come upon him, or at least why he believes the curse has come upon him, is because in battle, his whole squad, whatever you call them, they died, right? Or they went into the sky. That's I think the best scene in the film is that flashback. And then he survives. So there's a bit of the survivor's guilt, right? And there's also this idea, to get into his war themes a little bit, where he doesn't really want to play the war game, so he's kind of choosing to sit out. Mm-hmm. So that's why he has to become a bounty hunter. Because at least if he's a bounty hunter, he can do some good, right? So he saves the little girls at the beginning, which is also one of my favorite scenes, because the girls are like, the kids are just so like, yay, we get to go with the pirates, and just completely subverts what you think that scenario is going to go. Mm-hmm. Like if we were to make that in America, it'd be so dramatic, and like the kids would be freaking out. Yeah. Here the kids are like, ooh, I want to go explore the boat and all. There's like an innocence to it, you know? Mm-hmm. Since Ghibli is in a good place, Miyazaki is willing to try something like this more, and people are willing to sponsor it as well. The actual idea for Porco Rosso came from a Japanese airline that said, hey, can you make a short for us that we could play on both domestic and international flights? He said, sure, I'll make something. So here's kind of his statement here that he makes. And it was originally supposed to be a short, and as with many of these films, it gets expanded into a longer film. He says, Porco Rosso is designed to be a work that businessmen exhausted from international flights can enjoy, even if their minds have been dulled from a lack of oxygen. It must also be a work that boys and girls can enjoy. It is fun and upbeat, but not an over-the-top party. It is dynamic, but not obstructive. It is a balance of love, but needs no lust. To create a town that people would like to visit, a sky through which people would like to fly, a secret hideaway we ourselves would want, and a worry-free, stirring, uplifting world. So post-World War I, very European again. It's a little bit more jazzy, right? Like the score is a little more jazzy. Very Casablanca influence. You know, you got
it's almost opera-ish, or that style of singing.
Yeah, it's very like lounge. Like they literally have a scene in a nightclub, right, of singing. You know,
the girls don't like the music as much to this one.
No, they don't.
They're not as into it.
I really like this one. It's different. It's got a different feel than the rest of the films, which is refreshing and nice. So
I don't think we've watched this with the girls.
We did actually watch it with Addie. Addie was not into it.
Yeah.
She did not like this one, and she still doesn't really want to watch it. And I don't really think she's a target. I think, you know, he said this film is made for middle-aged men.
Yeah.
You know? And I think this is definitely a film that I know a lot of adults really like. Mm-hmm. Because even though it's animated in a sense that it looks very charming and not too threatening or dark, it feels very light. But there's something very...
not super light. There's like war and flashbacks and people beating each other. And
yeah, I guess that's true.
It's not super light like Totoro.
Yeah. You know, so it's a solid film. You only seen it once, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you were the biggest fan of it, but...
I wasn't the biggest fan. But
that's okay.
It's not that it was a bad film. It wasn't one of those films where you're watching, you're like, I can't wait for this to be over.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely entertaining. And it's short, too. It goes by really quick. So, lots of great characters, great moments. Another one I'd recommend. All right, that's going to be a wrap for part 1. This just was so long of a discussion that we decided to break it up into 2 parts. So join us next week as we continue with some of Miyazaki's masterpieces, including his 3 most popular films, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle. And at the end of that episode, we will reveal our rankings, in which we will give our brief opinions of every Ghibli film that's been released, including the non-Miyazaki ones. So join us next time for that. And until then, I hope you are doing well and living a meaningful story. Thank you so much, and take care.